I used to think the hospital air tasted like old pennies and lemon cleaner, the kind of smell that sticks in your throat when you're too tired to swallow. Dr. Kincaid had that same flavor, metallic and sharp, every time he said my name. Ellis, he snapped, as if my last name were a dropped instrument he had to pick up. Street medics don't teach medicine. They deliver bodies, chart it, and move. The residents laughed into their masks, the kind of laugh people pretend is about a joke, not a person. I kept my eyes on the monitor, on the little green line that tells you whether a stranger gets another chance at mourning. I've learned if you stare at the data, not the faces, the words slide off you like rain off a slicker. Still, it burned. It always burns a little. I told myself it was fine. People like me, foster homes, food stamps, a mama who signed more than she spoke. We get used to being the last one in the room whose voice counts. What I didn't expect was that the night everything flipped started ordinary. Humidity, heavy as a wet towel. Brass spilling out on Frenchman Street. Beads stuck to the gutters from last weekend's second line. My shift ended late because the last call ran long. A domestic, a blood pressure we steadied, a toddler who stopped crying when I folded a paper crane with nitrile gloves still on. I pocketed my trauma shears, a habit, like people who carry chapstick, and told myself I'd skip dinner and hit the bed before dawn. Then the sky spit, then poured, then hammered so hard you couldn't tell where the music ended and the rain began. New Orleans has this way of making a decision for you. If you're not inside when the sky breaks, you're part of the scene. I cut across Frenchmen with my hoodie pulled up, boots squeaking, the brass band shoving their horns under a blue tarp. That's when I saw her, tiny, soaked, still as a statue on the edge of the crosswalk, hands fluttering like a moth against glass. People flowed around her the way water folds around a piling. No one was cruel. They were just late and wet and human. I don't know why my brain clocked it before my ears did. But the movement registered first. Not panic. Pattern. She was signing. Sloppy. Frantic. But clear enough. Help. I stepped into traffic without deciding to. Left palm high like I owned the right of way. Right hand, moving slow and open where she could see it. I signed back. It's okay. I see you. I'm Maya. Come here. Her eyes locked on my hands, and the noise dropped out, like someone stuffed cotton in the city's mouth. She was 7, maybe, rain making commas out of her lashes. She carried a small plastic lunchbox, like it was a passport. Where's your grown-up? I signed. She pointed across the street to the dark mouth of a side lot where a black SUV idled under a drooping oak. No headlights. Window the color of secrets. My skin did that thing where every hair wakes up at once. I used to think I was done with other people's emergencies, I told myself, which is the kind of lie that sounds like a prayer. But then things changed fast. A man in a saint's cap jogged past, saw me blocking traffic with a kid pressed to my side, and swung around without being asked. You good? He yelled. We're crossing, I said. He turned his body broadside, arms wide like a referee, and for 3 heartbeats, the street belonged to us. People curse at ambulances until they need one. People are awful until they aren't. It's messy like that. We made the curb in a rush of brake lights and music, my hand on her shoulder, her small shoulder bones, a reminder of how breakable good things are. Up close. She was beautiful in that knife. Delicate way kids sometimes are, cheeks full, but jaw stubborn. Her lips formed words out of habit, but the sound didn't match the mouth. Name? I signed. Lena, she answered. The L, a little crooked but proud. Where's Mom or Dad? She pointed at the SUV again, then signed Dad with a certainty that made my stomach drop. The back window slid down 2 inches, enough for a slice of face I couldn't quite catch, enough for a hand to lift once. Come. I used to think if you keep your head down, the big dogs won't notice you. What I didn't expect was that sometimes the big dogs are already watching. We stood under the awning of a bar that smelled like old wood and fried oysters. I felt the bar's neon buzz through the brick like a heartbeat. Lena's fingers were shaking now that the crosswalk drama was over. That's the trick of adrenaline. It sends the bill after you sit down. I crouched, so our eyes met. You with me? I signed. We go together. She nodded. I squeezed her lunchbox, and something rattled inside like coins. But when I glanced down, I saw a little plastic magnolia clipped to the handle. White petals, gold center, expensive, in the way cheap things sometimes pretend to be. It made me think of Sunday dresses, and the way my mama taught me to sign beautiful by brushing the fingertips away from my chin. We crossed the lot slow. The SUV hummed with the confidence of things that never stall. The back door opened by itself like it knew the choreography. Warm air rolled out, leather and cedar and a cologne that costs more than my rent. The man inside wasn't old, but he had that seasoned stillness that makes some men look like they're listening when they're really measuring. Dark coat, a line of white shirt like a horizon. I saw the scar along his thumb before I saw his mouth. "Thank you," he said to me, voice smooth, but not soft, like the river when it's pretending it won't flood. He didn't ask who I was. He already knew I was a person who steps forward. Lena climbed in with the muscle memory of a kid who has practiced being careful. I stayed at the threshold because lines matter, where you stand, what you accept. "You lost your escort," I said, because sometimes plain speech is braver than polite speech. The man's eyes warmed by a degree I felt instead of saw. "Briefly," he answered. "Not anymore." He reached to the seat beside him and held out a card. Black on black. Heavy enough to suggest it would sink if you dropped it in a glass. No name, no number in ink, just a raised white magnolia in the corner. The same flower, the same message. You can find me if you know how to look. I should have walked away, clocked my 7 hours, gone home to my shoebox off St. Claude, reheated red beans. Let the rain work out its drama without me. But here's the thing about growing up in houses that aren't yours and schools that forget your face after June. You learn to read undertow. Something in that car wasn't about a ride-in from the rain. It was about how certain men treat weather like a dare and other people like pieces in a game. He watched me decide. He didn't push. He wanted to see if I could be steered. "I'm not a chauffeur," I said, tucking the card into my hoodie pocket anyway. "And I'm not cheap." His mouth did this smile that says a negotiation has begun. "No," he said, and his gaze flicked to Lena, who had gone quiet in the way deaf children go quiet, body loose, eyes greedy. "You're necessary." It landed in my chest like a stone and like a promise. Both. The SUV door side shut. The tinted window rose, turned his face into a roomer. The engine drifted them backward, smooth as a boat, leaving a dock. I stood in the rain with brass rebuilding itself 2 blocks away, cards sweating ink into my palm that would not smear. I thought of Dr. Kincaid saying deliver bodies, and I thought of my mama's hands moving in air like birds, spelling listen to a world that never did. What I didn't expect was how loud the city felt when the car was gone. Loud enough that I could hear my own thinking clear as church bells. Some insults you swallow, some you spend. Tonight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Brent notices? Don't care if you saved a life before breakfast. They always show up in red. I woke up to one stuffed under my door. The kind of paper that feels greasy even when it's dry. And Mr. Baptiste's polite handwriting on the bottom. Please call me today, Ms. Ellis. I won't lie. I did the math twice before coffee. Then poured gas. Station creamer into the mug like it could fix numbers. New month. Old bills. EMS paycheck that stretches like a rubber band you know is going to snap someday. I clipped the magnolia card he gave me to the fridge with a Saints magnet, then laughed at myself for giving a mystery man real estate next to my grocery list. Keisha honked from the street, and I jogged down, boots half, laced, hair braided on the bus steps, because that's the kind of morning it was. Girl, you look like the last 10 minutes of a double shift, she said, passing me a Waffle House coffee, so sweet my teeth hummed. We ran routes along Claiborne, the overpass throwing stripes of shade across folks packing up their tents, and I felt that quiet anger rise, the one that's not loud, just steady. You see enough people pushed to the edge, you start to hate fences more than the storm. We treated a heat syncope outside a po' boy shop. Owner came out with bottled water and 2 shrimp po' boys. For the heroes. And I wanted to cry, because kindness from people who can't afford it always lands the heaviest. The ER was the same show. Different soundtrack. Dr. Kincaid used my name like a reflex he couldn't control. Ellis, you don't present the case. You deliver it. Why is this IV like a garden hose? I kept my voice flat because that's how you survive men who fish for your anger. Wide bore for hypertension, I said. And he rolled his eyes like the answer offended him. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I had other things to do today, besides teaching a man how not to talk to people, too. Around noon, dispatch reassigned us to a standby detail at a gala, the Riverfront Renewal Fund. Black, tie, rooftop tent, string lights, and the whole "we save the city by writing checks" vibe. Marchese Marine and Logistics shelled out for the band. I recognized the logo from barges that crawl up the Mississippi like steel insects. Security met us with the kind of attitude that thinks radios make them taller. "Stay behind the rope," one of them said. His name patch read Silva, and his eyes did a quick scan of my uniform like he was measuring thread count. Keisha mouthed, "Wow," and I grinned without humor. "We'll be wherever the emergencies are," I said. And he didn't like that answer, but he liked our presence when a councilman tripped on a tent stake and face planted into a chafing dish. It was funny until it wasn't. The mayor's wife was laughing with a knot of people near the dessert table, hair shellacked, gowns sequined like fish scales, when her hand flew to her throat. You can always tell the difference between dramatic and real. The room knows it too. There's a shift in pressure. Her eyes went glossy, lips blanched, a wheeze like a paper straw, hives starting a fast crawl up her chest. Somebody said, "She's allergic to shellfish." Somebody else said, "The pralines." And 12 hands reached for 12 opinions. I didn't ask permission. I moved. "Ma'am, look at me," I said, already unzipping our kit. And when the sequins fought me, I pulled out my trauma shears and cut a perfect, ugly line up the side of a dress that probably costs more than my car. Gasps. People love a gasp when they're not the one dying. Epiauto, injector, lateral thigh, count to 10. "Breathe with me," I said, even though I knew she couldn't hear it the way you hear a lullaby. People understand breathing better than words. "Oxygen," I said to Keisha, and she was already there, cool and calm. The mayor kept saying, "We can handle this privately, like anaphylaxis respects PR and doctor." Kincaid materialized with a look that said we were trespassing on his reputation. "Ellis, stand down," he snapped, reaching for the airway as if grabbing the stage back. "No," I said, because seconds matter and egos don't. Epinephrine first, then we talk. And the truth is, the body told its own story. Flush eased, breath widened, blood pressure crawled up like a stubborn sun. "Second dose ready," I said, watching her chest, hearing the wheeze soften, noting the rash recede one border at a time. Kincaid settled for scolding. "She needs the ED now. On it," I said, already packaging, the cadence in my voice doing the work of 1,000 apologies I'd never say to him. Out past the rope. Folks parted because a gurney will make the self. Involved religious for 3 seconds at a time. That's when I saw them, him, again. The black suit, the stillness, the face I hadn't caught under the rain last night now lit by champagne lights. He watched me like I was a chess move he hadn't predicted. And at his side, a small comet in a velvet dress with mint, green headphones, eyes bright, hands tucked by instinct against her ribs. Lena. She saw me before he did. She signed thank you, tiny and fierce, and something in my chest unclenched that I didn't know was clenched. "Keep that line open," I told Keisha, meaning the IV and maybe something else. Silva stepped forward as if to block our path, and then paused when his boss's hand twitched half an inch. Men like him see the world in lines. That half inch told him which side of the line he stood on. In the ambulance, the mayor tried to negotiate with the universe. "We can't have sirens," he said. as if optics trumped oxygen. "Sirens off, lights on," Keisha said. "Because we're civil servants, and also not fools." At the ED doors, Kincaid tried to take a bow he didn't earn. I handed off clean, concise, documented like a textbook. The charge nurse winked at me when no one was looking. The small conspiracies that keep women sane. Back at the gala, packing gauze into a bag that used to hold my groceries, the night air felt like someone forgot to turn the dryer off. He came without making footsteps. "Miss Ellis," he said, and my name had weight, not edge. Up close, he had the kind of face that collects secrets rather than tells them. "You were efficient." "She was alive," I said, because words like efficient hide the part where people bleed. He nodded toward Lena, who had drifted within orbit, the headphones pushed to her neck now. "My daughter is fond of you." The way he said daughter made me watch him twice, a softness, clipped to keep from spilling. "She remembered your hands." Lena signed fireworks and scared, then safe, all in a little burst, like popcorn. I signed back, "You're brave and I see you." And she stood taller the way kids do when someone talks to them in their language. "I have a proposal," he said, and Silva's jaw worked like gum he didn't want. "Lena's sleep is complicated. Hypervigilance, startle responses. You could help." He didn't say therapist. He didn't say nanny. He said help. And there was a bit of pride in how plain the word was. "I have a job," I said. And for once, it didn't pitch upward. It landed flat. "And a landlord," I added, because I'm capable of two truths at once. "Compensation is not the problem," he said, which is the most expensive sentence in the English language. "Trust is." The way he said it made the hair lift on my arms, not from fear, from knowing I had a thing he couldn't buy at the store. Silva finally spoke, the Cajun in his voice poking through the radio static. "Boss, with respect, civilians complicate things." "Hector," he said, without looking. "Miss Ellis is not a complication. She is a solution." It would have been flattering if it weren't dangerous. I looked at Lena and thought of the kid at the overpass this morning, of the owner who gave us po' boys he couldn't write off, of the way people choose to be responsible for each other when the city stops pretending it will be. I used to think money solved the problem, I told myself. But the problem is which world you want to belong to. I told him I'd think. He didn't push. He pressed the magnolia into my palm like a signature and said, "When you are ready, call." We left with the gurney rattling like a shopping cart over brick. After shift, I climbed the stairs slow, the day catching up like a porch light flicking on along the block. Ms. Ida from 2B was leaning on her door jamb, fanning herself with a church bulletin. "I put gumbo by your door, baby," she said, eyes soft with that neighbor. Kindness that never makes the news. "Heard your radio earlier. Y'all go where angels are scared to." I wanted to hug her and cry and eat and sleep all at once. Inside, the rent notice waited like a dare. I ate gumbo standing up, the way people eat when they're alone and tired, and then washed the bowl because my mama would haunt me if I didn't. I held the magnolia card and thought about undertow, about lines, about how some men measure the weather and some of us carry umbrellas for strangers. I set the card back under the saint's magnet. "Not cheap," I said to the empty room. "Necessary." It sounded like both a promise and a problem. I used to think the river only sounded dangerous at night. Turns out daylight doesn't care. We were down by the port because Keisha and I dropped off a box of donated first aid kits at a church pantry that runs a Saturday clinic for deckhands. After, I cut through the public side of the Marchese terminal because it shaved 10 minutes off the walk to the bus. And in this city, 10 minutes is the difference between made it and caught in the next storm. I didn't plan to see them. Lena spotted me first, fingers flying hello like sparrows. A big foam finger from a Zephyrs game taped to her wrist, like a joke only kids understand. Dorian stood 3 feet behind her with that stillness again, talking to a supervisor about barges and schedules and all the ways water makes men pretend they're in charge. I knelt to Lena's level and signed boat and big, and she laughed without sound, which always hits me in the throat, because silence doesn't mean empty. Sometimes it means full. I should have kept it small. Hi. Bye. Keep moving. But the air did that quiver thing, the one you feel in your teeth before you register a noise. Out on France Road, a gray sedan nosed in too fast for a place where forklifts swing around corners. I clocked it the way you clock a bad dog. Chin low, eyes wrong. The driver's window slid down, and all my training boiled down to one word: down. I threw my body into Lena's and rolled behind a stack of palletized resin while the first shot stitched the asphalt. Keisha says gunfire sounds like a door slamming if you don't want to believe it. Today it sounded exactly like gunfire. Men yelled. People ducked without being told, because survival is a language even babies speak. A dock worker went down hard, clutching his thigh. A bright slick, catching sunlight in a way that makes you mad at the sun. Dorian moved like a chess piece you don't know the name for. Shoulder into Lena's father. Shape. Hand flat on her back. Eyes never leaving the car. Hector Silva was suddenly everywhere and nowhere, barking into a radio, trying to pin chaos to a channel. I smelled hot rubber and brine, and the kind of fear nobody admits out loud. Details glue themselves to me in moments like that. Half the plate, KXN3. A cracked right taillight that bled white. The passenger wore a saint's bracelet, black and gold, cheap elastic. His mouth forming words you could feel more than hear. Corta. Muelle. Cut. Pier. Muelle. Tresh. I didn't think. I just filed it, where important things go. The car fish-tailed out, while someone's forklift horn blared a long, sad accusation that didn't help anyone. The dock worker was 20-something. Calloused hands. Eyes bigger than they should be. Entry wound, mid. Lateral thigh. Venous, not arterial. Lucky, in a way, that's not lucky at all. You're okay, I told him, lying with purpose as my hands worked. Tourniquet with a belt, because he didn't have time to wait for something sterile. Gauze and pressure. You breathe, I'll squeeze. He nodded like people nod when their world shrinks to the square foot under their body. Keisha was already at my shoulder, because she's a mirror that shows up when I don't call. Ambulance, 2 mics out, she said. The radio crackled like frying bacon. I hated it for sounding domestic. Silva shouldered in, adrenaline pouring out of his voice like cheap beer. Secure the perimeter. Nobody moves. Miss Ellis, step back. I didn't look at him, because some orders die if you starve them of eye contact. He bleeds if I step back, I said. Not unkind, just true. Get me a real tourniquet, or get me out of your way. He froze a half-beat, insult flickering in his jaw, then shoved a cat tourniquet into my hand like it had been his idea all along. I cinched until the world narrowed to a pulse that stopped. The dock worker hissed air, then sagged, eyes wet with gratitude and pain. I told him a dumb joke about LSU football I don't even believe, because humor buys you 10 seconds when pain won't take a deal. When the siren finally cut the heavy air, I looked up and found Dorian watching. Not like a man who wants to own a thing, like a man trying to put a name to a new weather pattern. His sleeve was torn, grazed, maybe, and he hadn't noticed blood on his cuff. You're hit, I said. It's nothing, he said, which is rich coming from a guy with a blood stain and a child who saw bullets. Lena's hands trembled in that delayed way kids shake once everybody else starts breathing again. I took her fingers and pressed her palms to her belly the way my mama taught me. Here, breathe from here. She matched me. Chest down, belly up. The world got an inch wider. Silva's men swept cameras in their immediate circle, but gray sedans are like roaches. Too many, too fast. They'll be gone before NOPD finishes their coffee, I said, and Silva threw me a look that could file metal. This is a secure facility, he said, as if saying it makes it true. Your facility has a public road that kisses your fence, I said, pointing, and a camera across the street that doesn't belong to you. He hated that he hadn't said it first. That's the thing with certain men. They mistake thorough for threat. I jogged across to Bayou Mart, the little bodega that sells fried boudin and lottery hope. Ms. Thuy runs it with a smile that can quiet a room and a baseball bat under the counter that can quiet it faster. "Baby, I heard the pops," she said, already dragging a step stool to the DVR like she'd been waiting for a reason. We scrubbed back 60 seconds and then 30, fingers tapping the spacebar while the world flickered backward. There they were, gray sedan, window down, cheap bracelet catching light like an apology. The passenger leaned out just enough that when he turned to spit, a nasty little flourish, I caught his mouth. "Muole tres," he said. He also said, "Apaga la camera after," which would have been a great idea if he hadn't told on himself first. Ms. Thuy blew out a breath through her teeth. "Pier 13," she translated flat and fast, because half this city speaks 2 languages, whether it admits it or not. "You know Spanish, baby?" "Enough to get the shape of it," I said. I read mouths more than words. I thought of my mama signing "Listen to me" at bedtime when the house was too loud with other people's kids. You learn to see what isn't said. I walked the block once more to catch the plate clean on a city pole cam that didn't belong to anybody with a budget. KXN 398, cracked tail light, lazy left brake. When I got back, a detective wanted to take up space with posture and pens, so I handed him my notes before he could flex. He liked the plate. He didn't like that it was mine. He'll live. Silva met me halfway to the gate, the river wind turning his shirt to a second skin. "You went off property," he said. "So did the bullets," I said, and for a second, something like respect ghosted across his face before pride chased it off. "We don't need civilians investigating. You don't need civilians bleeding either," I said, nodding at the ambulance pulling away. That did it. His mouth tightened and his eyes flicked to where Dorian stood, absorbing, calculating, trying to reconcile the clean lines of his logistics with the mess of what had just happened. "Tell me," Dorian said, and the way he said it made Silva's jaw jump. I walked him through it quick. The plate, the tail light, the bracelet, and the phrase "muelle tres," and the fact that this wasn't a kidnapping attempt. Not yet. It was a probe. They were testing response times, I said. Seeing how fast your men move, how you move, whether you run Lena to cover or stand and swing. Pier 13's your soft edge if your schedule stacks wrong. Somebody leaked your rhythm or guessed it. I let that hang, because truth sometimes lands better if it drops on its own. He went very still. If you've ever watched a man with a plan find the line he didn't draw, you know that still. "How do you know it wasn't about making a point?" he asked. Not challenging, clarifying. "Because if they wanted a body, they'd have stopped," I said. "They wanted your attention and your pattern. Now they have both." He took that like medicine he'd been avoiding. "You read Spanish," he said, not a question. "I read people," I said, "and sometimes mouths. My mother was deaf." I signed, mother without meaning to, fingers brushing my chin. His eyes flicked to my hands as if learning a new alphabet mid-conversation. "Enough," Silva muttered. But Dorian lifted 2 fingers a quarter inch, and the mutter died. Power isn't loud when it works. He looked at Lena, who hugged that foam finger like a life vest. He looked at me the way men look at fire when they need it, but know it can burn. "Pack a bag," he said, voice even. "There's an old sugar mill on the river road. It's quiet, private. She'll sleep better there. You'll have what you need." He didn't say the word safe house, because saying a thing makes it a headline. I should have said no. I should have sent him to a pediatric trauma counselor and the nearest judge for a protective order he could put in a drawer. But I thought about the way Lena's hands shook after the shots, and the way Ms. Thuy didn't ask for permission to help, and the way the dock worker's heartbeat steadied under my palm, like a thing that wanted to keep trying. I also thought about Mr. Baptiste's note under my door, and the saint's magnet, and how long I could keep pretending my world didn't already touch his. "Ground rules," I said. "You don't lie to me. You don't use me as window dressing, and if I say we leave, we leave. No debate. Silva made a sound like a laugh, with the humor sucked out. Dorian didn't blink. Agreed, he said. It landed fast. No negotiation. And that scared me more than if he'd haggled. Tonight, he added, they won't wait. I looked down at my hands, still sticky with blood and river damp, and felt the usual tremor that arrives late when adrenaline sends you the bill. I already started, I said. He almost smiled, the smallest concession a man like him gives to luck. On my way out, the guy in the Saint's cap from Frenchman Street, the one who helped me stop traffic, stepped out from behind a stack of tires with a nod. I got you, sis, he said, like we'd been co-workers all along. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but I pocketed that sentence like another kind of card. Outside the fence, the river dragged a barge toward the Gulf like it had somewhere better to be. I texted Keisha one word, moving, and she sent back 3. Be careful, idiot, which is love in our dialect. I used to think necessary was a word other people used to rope you into their storms. Maybe sometimes it is. But standing there with a magnolia pressed into my palm and a child who breathed better when my hands moved, I realized necessary can be a door you choose. I went home, threw clothes in a duffel, folded my mama's old flannel on top like armor, and locked my apartment twice out of habit. The sugar mill waited, whatever that meant. The city hummed its endless song of broken and holy, and I tried not to think about Muelle Tress repeating under it like a bass line. The sugar mill looks like someone had peeled the skin off a church and left the bones. Brick ribs, rusted catwalks, the ghosts of ladders to nowhere. Inside, the air tasted like old syrup and metal dust. Hector's guys had scrubbed it into a safe house with dehumidifiers, blackout shades, and a panic room door disguised as a utility closet. It still clicked like a factory at night. I set up a corner that didn't feel like hiding. A thrift, store rug, a lamp that made warm light instead of interrogation light, a white noise box that sounded like a box fan in summer. Therapy isn't couches. It's what you can reach with your hands. For Lena, that meant rhythm. We did belly breaths, breathe here, and tapped out slow patterns on a plastic drum with a crack in it. We signed stories because stories in your hands don't get drowned by sirens. I cut the scratchy tags out of her pajamas with my trauma shears, because sometimes comfort starts with not itching. We made a routine. Morning. Cereal. She insisted on measuring with a scientist's seriousness. Noise. Canceling headphones nearby, but not always on. Midday. Adventure laps around the mill, with me naming every sound. Hoist, compressor, bird, truck, so her brain could file them under known instead of threat. Night. 2 pages from a picture book, and 5 minutes of heavy blanket time because pressure tells your nervous system you're not floating off the earth. Dorian pretended not to watch from the doorway. I pretended not to see his shoulders drop a 1/4 inch when Lena slept without the jump, startle she'd been living with. The smear hit on a Tuesday before lunch while I was teaching Lena to crack eggs, handed into a paper cup. My phone lit up with a text from Keisha. Call me now. Then the email from HR. Administrative leave pending investigation. Controlled. Substance variance. Then the group chat pinging with links to a blog that loves corruption, like gossip loves Sundays. Street medic under investigation for narcotics diversion, it said. And below that, a picture of me from the gala with a caption that made me look like I'd cut sequins for sport and fentanyl for breakfast. My heart did that painful thud that makes you think you're hearing someone else's bad news. Keisha called before I finished the headline. It's bull, she said, voice clipped, furious. Pixis says we're short 2 fentanyl vials from truck 22. They're saying you had custody. I charted returns, I said, and heard myself sound like a kid insisting the teacher miscounted homework. We both did, Keisha said. Badge scans confirm. The pharmacy says the return log was backdated at 0211 with your ID. I was asleep at 0211, I said. Yeah, she answered, something dark in her tone, which is why I called before I threw a chair. Internal Affairs left a message that felt like a trap laid out with please and thank You to Kincaid. Texted a single line that made me want to put my fist through concrete. I warned administration about your tendencies. Like, compassion is a drug, and I OD'd. I called my supervisor, who said words like policy and process and state board, and then I put the phone down and breathed because they were right about one thing. You don't fight a fire by screaming at water. Lena watched my face with that hawk, child attention kids have when they live in rooms with adults who change weather without warning. Mad? She signed, small and precise. Yes, I signed back, mad. And here. I took her small wrists and put her hands back on the egg cup. We finished the eggs like finishing mattered. You don't let bad men steal your rituals. Hector arrived with a file folder, like he was serving court papers. We heard, he said, chin high, the word we doing more work than he meant. Mr. Marquez has counsel, very good counsel, who can make a few calls. I looked at Dorian over his shoulder. No, I said. No calls to scare the board. I want my name clean, not handled. His jaw ticked once. A mechanic checking a gauge. Names can be cleaned in different ways, he said. Not mine, I said, and I felt something inside me plant its feet. I started my own audit because I don't know how to sit still when smoke is blowing under a door. I pulled my last month of run sheets from the cloud. Cross. Checked NARC counts with Keisha's notes. Circled every time we popped the lock on the drug vault. That night, Keisha texted a photo of a screen with her thumb hiding the top line and 2 words. Off record. A pharmacy tech she grew up with at St. Aug had sent it. The Pixis log showed my badge hitting return at 0211. The problem? The clinic hallway camera showed Kincaid's badge pinging the same cabinet at the same minute. My badge, piggybacked with a clone number. The tech wrote, "This is dirty. Watch your back." I stared until the letters stopped wriggling. The people who cut you love to make it look like you fell. That night, Lena woke at 3:17, the kind of wake that splits you open. We sat on the floor under the table, because tables are fortresses, if you pretend hard enough. Monster small, I signed, pinching my fingers close. Me big, she signed back, making her arms wide, then laughed a little, because the big looked ridiculous. Dorian stood by the doorway, bare feet. Shirt. The softest I'd ever seen him, like a man who forgot his armor in another room. He signed safe with a clumsy flick that made Lena grin like a sunrise. Who taught you that? I whispered. Watched you, he said. Not proud, just grateful there was a language in the house that worked. I used to think all noises were the same kind of threat at 3 a.m. Lying there on the rug with a 7. Year? Old's hair tickling my chin. I started hearing differences. The slow exhale of the dehumidifier, the low hum of the walk, and refrigeration unit at the back of the mill that Hector swore wasn't plugged to anything we didn't control. Except the hum was wrong. It had a hiccup every 9 seconds, like something cycling independent of the main compressor. I filed it, because once you train yourself to read bodies, you can't turn it off for buildings. In the morning, I made coffee like it could hold a house up. Hector did his usual perimeter sweep that looks like boredom to the untrained eye and like prayer to anyone who's been shot at. I asked about the refrigeration unit. Dead, he said. Power's off. We use the bay for storage. Hum says otherwise, I answered. And his look said, please, stop making my day longer. I waited until the afternoon when Lena was painting a magnolia with 5 wrong petals, and Dorian was on a call that made his jaw hard. I wandered back to the bay and stood under the metal ladder that once led to a catwalk. The reefer box sat on a raised slab, white, unmarked, the kind you see behind grocery stores chewing on electricity. The main power feed was cut, sure, but a slim cable the color of dust snaked from the wall up under the chassis, like someone had kissed a ghost. I crawled under and found what I was listening for. A suitcase. Sized generator duct. Taped to dignity and tucked in the shadow where no quick sweep would catch it. A cheap timer clicked. 9 seconds on. A whisper off. Repeat. Whoever rigged it didn't want cold. They wanted barely cold. The kind of cold enough you use to make something last through the day. My stomach sank in that way that has nothing to do with balance. I stood up too fast and whacked my head on the undercarriage. The reefer's door wasn't locked. Bad sign. Just latched, with the laziness of men who think their secret is safe, because they think we're not the kind of people who look. Inside smelled like bleach and plastic, and something that doesn't have a name if you want to sleep. Boxes, shrink, wrapped and labeled with fake produce codes. I slit one with my shears and found styrofoam coolers stacked like teeth. It wasn't drugs. It was paperwork, tighter than money, more dangerous than powder. Ledgers printed on thermal paper that would turn to mush in the wrong light. Codes that weren't hard to read if you grew up in a city where anyone who wanted to hide used Jesus words or street names to do it. The magnolia stamped in the top corner like a dare. Routes, dates, a column with a symbol, snowflake, next to numbers that matched reefer temps. Another symbol, stick figure lines, that didn't click until it did. Cold pack, head count, not fish, people. I didn't say anything for a long minute. Silence can be a tool or a wound, and right then, it was both. I pulled 3 pages and folded them into my sports bra, because girls from where I'm from know the oldest safe is the one under your shirt. Then I shut the door, like I hadn't said grace, over a crime scene. On the way out, I took a picture of the timer with my phone held low and my thumb ready to hit delete if anyone walked in. I had the urge to scrub my hands until the skin squeaked. Back in the main room, Lena smeared green where green didn't belong and looked happier than anyone with good sense. Dorian ended his call with a controlled exhale. "I can make the board go away," he said, like he'd been chewing that line to soften it. "I don't want you to make it go away," I said, and pulled the magnolia stamp sheet halfway out so he could see I wasn't talking about the board anymore. He looked at it, and what moved across his face wasn't surprise. It was recognition, and something that looked like Shame's older brother. He didn't reach for the paper. He reached for the back of a chair like he needed the past to be furniture. "You told me trust is expensive," I said, and my voice stayed calm because rage wastes oxygen. "Here's my price. You clean your house. You cut every pipe that touches this. And you go to someone who can do more than threaten blog editors." Hector said my name like a warning Maya, and stopped when Dorian lifted 2 fingers, the 1/4 inch that runs men like him. "Where?" he asked, meaning who, meaning how much blood. "Not your way," I said. "There's a woman in the federal building who doesn't bend for anybody. I don't need you to love her. I need you to tell her the truth, and I need my name back without your fingerprints on it." He looked at Lena, who was painting his cuff the color of spring because 7-year-olds don't see cuffs. They see blank canvas. He looked at me, at the place where I'd stashed paper like the world's worst safe. He signed promise with a seriousness that made my eyes sting, then said out loud, "Okay. No theater, no caveat. Just the kind of okay that means a bridge just got burned and we're going to feel the heat soon." My phone buzzed. A number I didn't know. A text with a photo of me at the mill gate, taken from a long lens, and the words, "You look good in syrup country. See you soon. No signature, no need. Muelle Tres isn't a place on a map. It's an appetite." I screenshot it and sent it to Keisha with the pin to our not safe house. She sent back 10:33, officer needs help, and a string of prayer hands I know she sends when she's swearing under her breath. That night, Ms. Ida from 2B called me like Grandma's call at exactly the right time. "Baby, I heard things," she said, and I could hear Wheel of Fortune in the background because she never misses it. I told them you couldn't steal a sugar packet without leaving a note. Your rent can wait a week. Consider it an old woman's hobby, keeping good people in the building. I put my hand over my eyes and let the relief find me. Underdogs don't run alone in this city. We have ladies with gumbo and bodega owners, with DVRs and deckhands who bleed on our boots and still say thank you. I went back to the reefer once after dark and set the timer 3 minutes off rhythm, because sometimes you don't stop the storm. You move the branch 3 inches so it misses a window. Then I hid the copies in 3 stupid places, inside Lena's foam finger, taped under the white, noise machine, and in a Ziploc in a bag of rice, because every mama I've ever met thinks rice fixes water. I slept on the floor next to the panic room door because the rug still felt like a fortress, and because I wanted my body between Lena and whatever thought it wanted her. I used to think the worst part of being smeared is the noise. It's not. It's the quiet afterward where you have to decide who you are. I decided. They could take my badge for a while, but they couldn't make my hands forget their work. And if certain men wanted me off the board because I saw too much, they were going to hate what happened next. You can frame a person, but you can't frame a ledger that carries your own stamp. I used to think once you put proof on the table, people either run or rebuild. Turns out men with empires try to redraw the table first. I laid the copies out anyway, 3 thin sheets that felt heavier than iron, and told Dorian exactly what I wanted. Clean house, cut every dirty line, walk the truth into a federal office with his own 2 hands, and give me my name back without his shadow on it. He didn't sit. He leaned on the counter like the wood might keep him from drifting, eyes flicking to Lena, painting magnolias at the end of the table, to Hector, posted by the door, chewing on the word liability, the way some guys chew toothpicks. Rojas didn't invent my rot, Dorian said finally, voice low enough I had to lean to hear. He just noticed it. He rubbed his thumb along an old scar, like worry beads. After Katrina, when the water sat and the rules floated off, I told myself I was feeding families by moving what needed moving. Diesel, insulin, plywood. We started clean. You know how fast you can slide from helping to helping yourself when every handshake comes with a favor. He didn't blink when he said, Sophia died because I told a man like Rojas no on a Tuesday, and then told him later on a Friday. He picked Thursday to teach me a lesson. I didn't touch him, didn't say sorry, because there are some stories you honor by not sanding them down. Okay, I said. Then we don't do later anymore. Hector was unmoved. You think the feds are church ladies, he told me, quiet and mean. They'll hang him with the same rope you hand them. I think Tara and Gwen doesn't care who you are, I said, pulling a crumpled business card from the bottom of my backpack, where all the important things hide with gum wrappers. She cares what you bring and how fast you drop it. She's the one who put 2 pastors and a councilman on probation the same week and still made choir on Sunday. She's not my friend. She believes in paper. I called her from the mill's back stairwell, where the air tasted like tin and sugar, and I led with the part that mattered. Ledger, reefer, timer, Pier 13, a child in the middle of men's pride. She didn't coo or gasp. She said, You have 3 pages? I'll need 300. Can he sit for a proffer? Tonight. I told her about the smear on my badge, and she didn't waste sympathy on it. If it's dirty, we'll clean it. Bring what you have, keep what you love safe, and understand the floor shifts if he lies. I said yes because I was tired of rooms where men skipped steps and called it strategy. We met Tara at a place that rinses powdered sugar off tables every hour. No back booths, no shadows to hide in. She wore a navy suit you could cut your hand on, and sneakers like she'd run to court if traffic didn't move. She scanned the room, clocked exits, sat where she could see the door and the street, and looked at me first. Not him. You brought this, so I'm talking to you, she said, and Hector almost smiled because he respects gravity. Dorian didn't bristle. He looked relieved, like someone else finally picked up a weight he'd been pretending wasn't heavy. Tara opened with ground rules that had more teeth than most guard dogs. Immediate cessation of all unlawful operations, full disclosure of routes, shell companies, and cash channels, consent to independent monitors on the legitimate business, a recorded proffer with counsel present, no promises beyond her authority, any lie, any omission, and the deal evaporates. You can walk back out the door and hope your luck holds, she said, sipping cafe au lait like it was the lie detector. Or you can tell me where the bones are before your friends do. Dorian signed promise without thinking, and Tara's eyes ticked to his hands, a question she didn't ask out loud. My daughter is deaf, he said, and the word daughter didn't wobble this time. He looked at me when he said it, which was both a thank you and a confession. We start with Pier 13, I said, laying down the 3 sheets. Then I told her about the 9. Second hum, the timer, the snowflake code, the stick, figure shorthand that looked like nothing until you listened hard enough. Tara didn't interrupt. She wrote in a neat, angry hand. "You're going to hate how this goes," she told Dorian. "We'll have you wired, or we'll have your phones. We'll step on your accountants. We'll audit your warehouses. And if you touch a single witness, we'll pretend we never met, and I will take your last name off a building." He nodded once, and I saw in that nod a man who'd finally run out of closets. We hashed the ugly parts in public daylight, where we'd staged the drop, which managers we could flip, whether we burned Pier 13 fast or let it run 2 days to map every artery. And when Tara asked if Rojas had a priest, he preferred for cash drops. Dorian looked like he might laugh or throw up. "He uses a bait shop," he said, and Tara wrote it down as if naming a church. When she finished, she slid me a thin folder with my own name on it. "Internal Affairs reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office this morning for a declination consult," she said. "Pharmacy logs show badge cloning at 0211. We're subpoenaing the hospital's access data. I can't unring every bell online, but I can kill the echo." The relief hit so hard it made me lightheaded, not because I thought I needed a stranger to tell me I wasn't a thief, but because somebody with power finally said it out loud. On the walk back to the mill, the city felt like it had blueprints again. Hector stayed 2 steps behind, still mad, but less alone with it. "You think she's clean because she's mean," he said. "I think she's mean because she's clean," I said, and he grunted like I'd said something he wished wasn't true. In the truck, Dorian kept his hands on 10 and 2 like a kid who just passed the test, knuckles pale, jaw set. "You surprised me," he said. "Which part?" I asked. "All of it," he said, and the corner of his mouth found a shape that wasn't a smile, but wasn't empty either. He signed thank you with a wristy little flourish that made me laugh. Then he tried sorry and botched it, and I took his hand and moved his fingers the right way. It wasn't romantic. It was cleaner than that. At the mill, Ms. Tuet from Bayou Mart showed up with a paper bag full of hot boudin and a thumb drive she pulled out of her apron like a magician. "Cops asked for my footage, but I keep a copy," she said. "There's a man in a Saints bracelet who buys scratch, offs every Thursday at 8:12 a.m., always 2 blocks from Pier 13. He talks like he's in charge when he's not. He spits on my sidewalk. You can use that." She didn't want money. She wanted her block back. I kissed her cheek, and she scolded me for making her blush. That night, I called Mr. Baptiste and told him I'd be late on rent for 1 more week, and he said, "Child, I was a longshoreman 32 years and a deacon 50. If I can't spot a good soul in trouble, take me to the eye doctor. Pay me when your name is clean." He added that his cousin Lionel had a file box in his garage from the union days, time cards and donation receipts with pier numbers scribbled in pencil, which sounded exactly like the kind of boring gold Tara collects. The city is noisy with people who catch you when you don't know you're falling. I stood in the doorway and watched Lena sleep, hands open like she'd finally let the day go. Dorian hovered 1 pace behind me, careful, in that way men get when they're trying not to spook a skittish animal. "You're not responsible for the storm," I said without turning. "Just for the boat you built." He took that like a man who deserved a harder sentence, but would take the one offered and try to live inside it. "My boat has holes," he said. "Then we patch," I said. "But we stop sailing into hurricanes on purpose." He didn't touch me. He didn't ask to. He said, "Tomorrow," like a vow. I believed him more than I wanted to, less than a fool would. In the distance, a train called the night to order, and the river answered. I slid the extra ledger copies deeper into the foam finger, because kids' toys are the last place grown men look for the truth, and I mapped the storm drains in my head in case we had to leave in 3 minutes without shoes. Hope is a muscle, not a mood. You work it until it holds. We had a plan, a prosecutor who didn't flinch, a city full of small, stubborn kindness, and a man willing to bleed in public to shut the door. He opened. Cautious hope tastes like black coffee. You don't drink it for sweet. You drink it because tomorrow's coming either way, and you'd rather meet it awake. I used to think trouble announces itself with a drum line. Turns out it moves like mold. Quiet, patient, right under your nose. The mill had one of those slow afternoons where nothing happens and your nervous system still won't sit down. Lena and I were sorting buttons by color like it was a job with benefits. Dorian was at the work table with a legal pad writing out names he wished were shorter. Hector checked the cameras with the boredom of a man who's learned boredom keeps you alive. The air felt heavier than the weather app said it should. Then the hum changed. Not loud, just off. A 9-second hiccup I taught my brain to log. I put my hand on the concrete floor, check a fever on a child's forehead, and felt the tiniest shiver. Water somewhere. It didn't belong. I walked to the drain by the loading bay and crouched. It smelled like river and city, metal, algae, something old that never fully dries. The trickle ran the wrong direction. "Hector," I said, not raising my voice. He was already moving, which is why he's still breathing. The exterior feed flickered once, then twice, then went gray. Power on our side still held. Lights. Fans. But the network died like someone cut it on purpose and wanted us to know they had hands in our walls. Hector cursed in Spanish with a Catholic's efficiency and reached for the panic room key. Somewhere deep under the mill, a steel sound rang out. The sound of a hatch that wasn't ours opening to a tunnel that wasn't on our map. Lena felt the weather change inside the room. Kids like her are barometers with legs. She slid closer without speaking, eyes wide, hands hovering at her chest, like maybe language could hold a door shut. I signed. We go now, with the clean sharpness you use when you don't have time to sweeten anything. Dorian's whole body shifted in one smooth turn. Work pad down, weapon up, voice level. "Hector," he said, and there was a history in that one word. 100 nights you don't want to name. Hector answered with a chin lift. 3 fingers, then a flat palm, 3 entry points. Hold. And a look that asked me to cooperate with the choreography of men who prefer to solve problems with bullets. "Panic room," Hector said, jerking his head at the closet that wasn't a closet. "They have thermal," I said. "They have time," he said. "We don't." We were both right. The floor hiccuped again. I grabbed the go. Bag I keep by the back door. Headlamp. Duct tape. Triangle bandages. Spare socks. Kit. Sized ear protection. Cheap rain ponchos that crinkle like candy wrappers. And pulled the heavy blanket off the couch. "Shoes," I told Lena, and she climbed into her sneakers with the concentration of a surgeon. I stuffed her headphones over her ears and signed game, because sometimes you have to dress terror up as play. Tap, tap, breathe, tap, tap, breathe. She nodded and tapped the rhythm on her own thigh, mouth counting without sound. The first metal thud hit the bay doors like a body thrown against a locker. You learn a lot about men from how they enter a room they don't own. These didn't bother with speeches. 2 more thuds, then a slice of light near the floor where a circular saw bit into steel. Hector took a position that made him look like he'd been born in a doorway. Dorian moved to the right flank, his whole shape getting smaller and colder. He looked at me, really looked. In that half second, I hate where men try to memorize you. "Run," he said. "You keep saying that like it's my last name." I answered, and he almost smiled, which is a ridiculous thing for a person to do with a saw chewing their door. But there we were. We didn't use the panic room. We used the drain. There's a maintenance hatch in the old bottling bay that drops into a culvert that was supposed to carry off rain, back when the sugar mill had shifts and pay stubs. I'd traced it on a city map at 2 a.m. last week, because my brain will not stop building exits, once you show it a door. I cracked the hatch, and the smell slapped us. Wet gypsum. Rot. Rat. I hate roaches more than bullets. Headlamp, I said, and immediately kicked myself. I signed light and pointed so Lena would see. It wasn't the bad kind. She slid her hand into mine so tight I felt the bones stack. The breach sounded like a scream you don't hear so much as feel. Hector's return fire was 2 short barks, nothing wasted, followed by a ragged curse that meant someone was down, and it wasn't him. Dorian took a shot, and another, then hissed like a kettle. He kept his feet. Men like him are too proud to fall in front of their ghosts. But his right sleeve went dark, and I smelled the copper. You never forget once it's in your hair. It's a graze, he said on reflex, which translates to, my shoulder is on fire, and I will not say it. I tore open an Israeli bandage with my teeth and threw a pressure pad under his hand. Hold, I said. He held. Go, he said. We went. The culvert swallowed us. The water sat calf, high in some places, and kissed the hem of my jeans in others. Every step lifted bits of a city older than me off the bottom. We moved hunched because the ceiling wanted a piece of our skulls. I counted intersections with my hand on the right wall. Right, left. Like an old superstition, Lena's tap. Tap didn't falter. Roaches winged in the headlamp beam like cheap angels. Nope, I said out loud, because sometimes humor is the only weapon that doesn't jam. And Lena actually snorted, which might be the bravest sound I've ever heard. Behind us, boots hit metal rungs. You can tell, trained from sloppy by the rhythm. These were in between. Men who'd done this enough to think they were good, and not enough to be careful. 2 minutes, Hector had said. We had one. I pulled my phone and opened Tara's secure link, the one with a name in my favorites that looks like spam to anyone not us. One tap broadcasted our location. Another turned on passive audio. Not social media. I'm reckless, not stupid. Still, I threw a bone to public truth. I texted our EMS group chat, Sisters with Sirens, with a string of code words that mean watch scanners, send directions, shut up online. Keisha replied so fast I could feel the eye roll through the phone. Left at the Y. Take the outfall towards St. Luke's. I'm rolling. Don't die, idiot. We climbed a graded ladder and shouldered up into the world behind St. Luke's, a church that went broke 3 pastors ago and now collects weeds and teenagers at golden hour. There's a mural of a saint on the back wall, with eyes so kind they made me mad. I dragged the blanket around Lena's shoulders because wet kids cool fast and hypothermia doesn't check the calendar. Dorian came up last, pale, jaw locked, breath tight, in that I'm fine way men use right before they stop being fine. I shoved the bandage harder into his shoulder and ducked, taped it, because fancy doesn't save you in a parking lot. You breathe with me, or I knock you out, I said. He actually breathed. Progress. Across the narrow street sat Bay Watch, Bait and Tackle, the shop Tara joked about like a church. A man in a saint's bracelet leaned on a dented Ford, bored like only small. Time tyrants can be bored. The bell over the bait shop door chimed. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Kincaid stepped out first. No white coat, just a scrub top under a jacket that probably still smelled like the ED. And he did that little look. Around men do when they've done something wrong and want the universe to clap. Saints. Bracelet handed him an envelope the size of shame. They shook like they were secretaries carrying casseroles to a wake. I didn't think. I slid my phone under the corner of the fence and let it see without being seen. Tara's link grabbed the frame and the location and the audio. Apaga la camera again. Like the universe can't resist a punchline. And I whispered our cross, straight into the mic. A siren's wail floated from way off, like somebody answering a question I hadn't had time to ask. And Dorian tried to sit up straighter, like dignity could hold a blood pressure. Don't, I told him. You already did the macho thing. Now do the living thing. He gave me a look that would have been insult if he'd had strength for it, then let his head hit the brick and squeezed my wrist once hard. I heard you. The back door of the church creaked, and Mr. Joe, who I recognized from a block party, because he grills the good sausage and tells kids to pick up their trash like he invented the concept, poked his head out with a set of keys on a Saint's lanyard. "I saw a whole lot of nothing out here," he said pointedly, like a man who understands how plausible deniability works. "And if folks who aren't here need towels that were never in our sacristy, they might find some by the sink." He didn't wait for thanks. He has grandkids. He knows the value of speed. Hector slid in from the alley, bleeding from a crease on his forearm, eyes up and narrow. "3 down, 2 peeled off," he said, low. "They're spooked." He saw Dorian's shoulder, and his jaw tightened like he'd rather trade places than compliment me for the tape job. "We need wheels," he added. "We need witnesses," I answered, nodding at the bait shop. Kincaid was putting the envelope into his jacket with the clumsy arrogance of a man who's never been poor. A white SUV rolled past slow, windows down, the driver clocking the exchange in the quiet. Nosy way. New Orleans clocks everything. Sometimes your jury is whoever happens to be thirsty. Blue lights finally made the corner with a speed that said feds on board. 2 NOPD units bracketed the Ford, and Tara slid out of an unmarked with sneakers and the look of a woman who enjoys ruining plans. She didn't shout. She didn't posture. She said, "Hi, doctor," like a nurse waking a man for his 3 a.m. vitals. And Kincaid's mouth did that fish thing you pray for as a prosecutor. Saints. Bracelet tried to smoke his way into invisibility. An agent with forearms like telephone poles gently suggested he exist somewhere else, against the hood. Tara held the envelope like a dead rat and raised one eyebrow at me across the distance without breaking chain of custody. It was the classiest thank you I've ever gotten. Keisha's ambulance nosed into the alley, half on the curb, because that's how you park when seconds count, and parking tickets don't. She jumped out with a trauma bag and a smirk. "You find the stupidest places to need me," she said, gloves snapping like punctuation. She looked at Dorian's shoulder, at my tape, at the way his face tried to lie. "He's not dying today," she said. And then to Lena, "You're the boss. You hold the light." Lena held the pen light like a job she earned. Her hands stopped shaking while she did it. We oxygened. We palpated. We decided not to tourniquet. We packaged. Dorian tried to apologize, and Keisha shushed him with the kind of gentle that's louder than yelling. "Save it for court," she said, "or therapy. I'm not picky." My phone pinged with a headline. Push I didn't subscribe to. People send you the news. You become, whether you want it or not. ED physician. Detained in alleged bribery scheme, linked to port violence. Sources cite badge, cloning probe. I felt vindication and nausea fight in my throat. This wasn't about a headline. It was about a kid sleeping without adrenaline as a pillow. It was about a man who finally stopped trying to steer his storm with money. It was about people like Ms. Tui and Mr. Baptiste and Mr. Joe and Keisha showing up in the exact sizes they are. No capes, no theme music, just tape and towels and testimony. On the stretcher, Dorian found my hand and signed promise with his left. Clumsy, but clear. "Tomorrow," he said, because men like him think they owe you big words when what you want is small, consistent ones. "Tomorrow," I said back, and he shut his eyes like it was a pact. Hector hovered with the look of a man who understands the math of loyalty and wishes the numbers were kinder. "Go with them," I told him. "I'll get Lena home." He bristled like I'd insulted his job description, then nodded once. He trusts me now, which is colder and heavier than I expected. We rode in the back while Keisha did her ballet, vitals, evo, monitoring, all the tiny mercies that make a person feel like they're not dying alone. Lena kept one hand on Dorian's elbow the whole ride because kids know where to put love. Out the back window, the bait shop got smaller, and the church got taller, and the city kept moving like it always does, pretending it didn't just hold its breath for 10 minutes. Tara texted me a single line that made me laugh without sound. "Bring me the rest of the bones." I texted back a picture of a foam finger. She sent a question mark, and I wrote, "Trust me." I used to think Redemption was a speech you give when people clap at the right time. Tonight, it felt like duct tape on a shoulder, and a live location ping, and a neighbor with towels, and a prosecutor with sneakers who hates envelopes. The internet will say, I went live. I didn't. I survived loud enough to be believed. There's a difference. And out here, where the river reshapes the map when it feels like it, being believed is the beginning of the rebuild. I used to think justice shows up in a cape. Turns out it wears steel, toe boots, carries clipboards, and smells like diesel and coffee. The morning of the port takedown started quiet, in that fake way the city does when it's trying to hold still before a storm. Dorian's shoulder was bandaged and ugly. Hector had the haunted look of a man counting exits in his sleep, and Lena ate her cereal with the solemn concentration of a kid auditioning for normal. Tara texted at 5:11 a.m. Green light. Bring the bones. I pulled the foam finger off the top shelf, slit the seam like I was a surgeon, and laid the copies next to Mr. Baptiste's union time cards that Lionel dug out of his garage. Carbon paper ghosts of donations, pier numbers penciled like confessions, dates that matched our ledger down to the Thursday. Nobody remembers until you remind them. Louise showed up with Café Suada for luck, and a sworn statement on her letterhead that read like a sermon. The Saints? Bracelet man? The scratch. Offs at 8:12. The plates. The spit. She didn't sign with flourish. She signed like a person who keeps receipts, because the world made her learn to. We convoyed to the federal lot, unmarked cars that still somehow look like cops. Keisha tailing us by accident in case bodies forgot to be brave. Tara ran a fast proffer in a conference room that could double as a church basement. Bad lighting, cold air, water in a jug with a spigot that squeaks. Dorian set it all straight. No theater, names, routes, shell companies that sound like laundry angels, the bait shop, Pier 13 side gate, the reefer hum like a heartbeat you can't ignore. He didn't pretend the rot started yesterday. He owned it like a man who knows the price of later. Tara's stenographer barely blinked. You could feel a machine bigger than any one of us start to move. By 9, agents in Navy windbreakers with big white letters the internet loves were fanning out behind the port's neat lies. I watched from the hill above France Road with a mouth so dry I could taste cardboard. You always this calm when the world is on fire? I asked Tara. I don't get paid to be interesting, she said, and handed me binoculars like they were an old friend. The first team hit Pier 13 from the water in a boat with a motor that whispers. The second rolled up the service road like delivery trucks. No shouting, no cowboy nonsense. Locks cut, hands where we can see them. You in the high, Viz vest. Please don't be heroic. Rojas tried to make an exit through a side door, like a man who built the hallways himself. Silva stepped into him with that quiet violence some men practice as prayer. Forearm to throat, weight balanced, eyes not mean, just finished. Enough, Silva said. And for the first time since I met him, I heard tired in the word. In the reefer, they found more paper and a cooler that wasn't for fish. The snowflake code wasn't metaphor. It hurt to be right. I kept breathing anyway. You can hold two truths at once. Relief and grief shake hands when you're busy. NOPD did their thing, but this wasn't their show. The feds moved quick, clean, clinical. Every time someone reached for a story, a camera, a receipt, Tara's people were there to catch it before it could fall into the river and pretend it never existed. I texted Keisha a single okay, and she sent back a gif of a woman fainting onto a couch. Humor is how we don't drown. They Mirandized Rojas by the bait shop, and the man with the saint's bracelet tried to go small enough to fit under his own collar. Kincaid stood on the curb in scrubs like a man who got dressed for the wrong party. The medical board investigator read him the paragraph that empties your schedule for the next decade. He tried indignation, then reason, then pity, like bad actors cycle accents. This will ruin my career, he said to no one in particular. You did that, Tara replied, already walking past him to sign a chain of custody sticker with handwriting that could slice fruit. Back at the mill, the air shifted like someone had opened a window in a house that smelled wrong for years. Dorian called a meeting in the main room, that used to hold sacks of sugar and now held faces that needed new maps. Managers, dock chiefs, a bookkeeper who kept moving her pen without writing, like she could keep her muscle memory, but not the job. He didn't give a speech. He read names. Effective now. Full compliance monitorship. Every account opened. Every ledger triple. Copied. Every truck GPS'd. If you want to work clean, there's a place for you. If you need to quit so your past doesn't get audited, tell HR before lunch. If you lie to me one more time, you'll do it in a deposition. I watched shame and relief take turns on people's faces. You could see the ones who'd been scared to ask for clean by how fast they nodded. You could see the ones who wanted to slip out by how much they looked at the floor. Hector stood to the side like a wall you lean on when you have to, when it got quiet enough to hear the dehumidifier. Dorian walked to where Lena sat with Ms. Ida, coloring a magnolia for the 1000th time. He signed promise with his left hand, because the right still hurt, and he looked at me like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be human yet. Restitution fund, I said, like we were making a grocery list. Victims first. Real therapy, not PR. Pay what you owe. He nodded, not solemn, determined. Tara wrung him out in court the next week, because mercy without teeth is a rumor. He pled to the counts with numbers that make civilians dizzy. The judge read from paper in a voice that carries through microphones and marriages. No prison, for now, but a sentence that bites. 5 years probation with conditions, 18 months of home monitoring, corporate monitorship with quarterly reports, forfeiture that would make a rich man get religion, mandatory funding for a victims clinic that will sit where Pier 13 once pretended to be a place to earn wages. The courtroom hummed with the hum of people who showed up to see if money ever actually pays. Rojas didn't look at us on his way out in cuffs. Kincaid did. He looked shocked that the world didn't clap for him. My license got an email before my brain caught up. Badge cloning confirmed. No action against your credential. The hospital's PR put out a statement that read like a hostage note and mentioned my name in the "We regret" paragraph without apologizing. I screenshot it, sent it to Keisha, and we both laughed like people who don't need an institution to tell us who we are. A week later, we sat on folding chairs at the St. Claude Rec Center, while a woman from the AG's office explained the consent decree like a Sunday school lesson. Parents with babies. Longshoreman with hands like maps. A social worker who looked 17 and already had a spine like rebar. We put a big paper calendar on the wall and wrote dates for intake. Trauma groups, ASL classes, because the clinic would be accessible or it wouldn't be honest. Ms. Twee donated a mini fridge. Mr. Joe said he'd do security Tuesdays and Thursdays between dialysis. Mr. Baptiste promised the deacons would keep trouble bored, which is the best crime prevention strategy I've ever heard. Folks clapped in that awkward way communities clap when they're clapping for themselves, not a stage. Later, outside, Dorian leaned against the building like a man who finally gets why benches exist. I thought sentencing would feel like the end, he said. It feels like somebody tossed me a mop. Then mop, I said. You wanted clean. This is what clean sounds like. He looked at Lena raising her hand in the ASL class, starting in the corner, answering a question before the teacher finished asking. Confident and loud, in the way only hands can be loud. He wiped his good hand over his face once, like he was washing off a film that fought to stay. I don't know how to do this right, he said. Do it sincere, I said. We can fix sloppy. We can't fix fake. He laughed, short, surprised, and signed thank you without me fixing his wrists. That night, I stood in my kitchen and finally ripped the rent notice in half. Not because money fell from the sky, but because Mr. Baptiste had taken my check with a smile and a slice of lemon icebox pie he insisted I borrow with no return date. The mill hummed on a new frequency. The reefer was gone. The panic room door stood open like a dare we didn't need anymore. I slept with the window cracked and didn't dream of drains. The internet called me a hero and then moved on, because the internet has the attention span of a gnat. That was fine. The people who mattered had longer memories. The next morning, Keisha texted at dawn. Want a stupid early beignet? I did. On the way out, I clipped the black card with the white magnolia back on my fridge. Not as a trophy, not as a threat, Just a reminder that some symbols mean whatever you make them mean next. I used to think happy endings showed up with fireworks. Turns out they arrive like morning. Quiet. Late if traffic's bad. And still worth getting up for. A year is a long time, and also nothing at all. The sugar mill doesn't hum like a secret anymore. The reefer's gone. The panic door stays open. And kids run laps on Saturday mornings, while Ms. Ida hands out fruit cups and lectures about hydration like she's on a pulpit. We turn the East Bay into a classroom with a rug that looks like a river and an alphabet in ASL sketched across the wall. The sign for Brave sits over the door, because why pretend that's not the homework? We call it the Magnolia Clinic, because sometimes you take a symbol that used to feel expensive and make it practical. Therapists get paid on time. Interpreters don't have to promise they'll try. And mothers don't have to tell a counter, they're just looking. When what they mean is, we're here because we're scared and we need help. Dorian shows up 3 mornings a week with a limp. He refuses to glorify, and a coffee he pretends isn't decaf, because Tara's monitors can smell adrenaline the way dogs smell bacon. He sits with the men who pretend they came for the air, conditioning, and ends up talking about budgets and apologies, like he's learning a new muscle group. He signs clumsy on purpose, so the dads who don't want to look foolish will risk looking foolish, and Lena corrects all of them with the glee of a 7. Yair, old who found out grown-ups make typos. I took the coordinator job at EMS because paperwork doesn't scare me anymore, and because I like getting rookies ready for the part where the room turns and you either keep breathing or you don't. I still pull shifts when Keisha asks. Mostly nights. Mostly the calls nobody wants, because I'm stubborn about the math. If you're steady for strangers, you stay steady for yourself. The hospital sent a letter with legal-shaped sentences that cleared my name without saying sorry. We stapled it to the bulletin board at the clinic under a sign that says receipts. Kincaid's license vanished like a magician's trick. Only this time, everybody kept the mirror, and Rojas reads his mail behind glass. I thought that would feel like dessert. It tastes more like oatmeal, solid and plain, and that's fine. Justice is a mop and a calendar, not a parade. Some days still carry that old ache like weather in a bad knee. I'll be chopping onions for jambalaya, and the knife flash will feel like a muzzle flash. I'll see Lena's hands tremble just a hair when a motorcycle backfires outside the corner store, and I'll have to swallow the urge to scoop her up like she's a toddler and run to a room that locks. She's 8 now, and bosses the younger kids with a whistle she inherited from Ms. Tui. Her science fair project took up 2 tables, the solar system with LEDs in the right places, and a whole constellation guide in Braille, and raised paint so her friend Mateo could see it. She stood in front of the gym crowd, clicked her pointer, and presented in ASL with a voice interpreter at her elbow because we teach both at the clinic. Access goes both ways. When she signed Saturn, her hand made that ring. We practiced over the dining table 1,000 times. And Dorian's mouth did the wobble he hates. So I bumped his shoulder like we were just 2 parents getting knocked around by pride. The judges asked what inspired her to include Braille, and she didn't go soft. She said, "Because I don't like when my friends are left out." And the gym sighed in that way crowds sigh when a kid tells the truth that feels like a permission slip. I thought the applause would swallow me. It didn't. It lifted to the rafters and then came back down gentle, like the city tossing us a blanket. There's a part of me that still counts exits in new rooms, still maps drains and imagines water rising where it shouldn't. The difference is, I'm not alone with it. On Thursday nights, the clinic runs group for grown-ups who used to call it nerves, because therapy sounded rich. Mr. Joe sits in the corner pretending he's there to fix the coffee machine, and ends up telling a story about the time he almost didn't make it, and what it cost to turn back. Ms. Tui brings Bon-Com and writes grant narratives that sound like novels, because she insists funders fall in love with real people, or the money doesn't deserve the work. Mr. Baptiste stands by the door like an usher, counting heads, because he likes the math of company. On Sundays, sometimes I sit on the mill's steps with Keisha, and we talk about stupid things, dating, the Saints pre-season, whether the new beignet stand is sacrilege, and then we fall quiet, because quiet is a friend when you're held together with duty and duct tape. She teases me about Dorian the way older sisters tease you when they've watched you crawl out of fire and try on softness, like it might not fit. "You sleeping yet?" she asks. "Mostly," I say. "And him?" "Less," I say. Because guilt is heavy, and rehab for the soul takes longer than shoulders. I used to think love was heat and lyrics and grand gestures. Turns out it's dinner that doesn't need a speech, a text that says home and means I left the porch light on, a father practicing sorry in the mirror because he wants to say it right the first time without turning it into a performance. The ring didn't come with a Neil. It came at the kitchen table with the mail, between a water bill and a flyer for a fish fry. He set a small box down, like you set down a bird you plan to free, if it fights, and said, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for future." The ring was simple, a thin band with a magnolia pressed flat in white gold. No diamonds, no legacy attached that we'd have to wrestle into behaving. I touched it with a fingertip and thought about the first night under the awning on Frenchman Street, about a black card I stuck under a saint's magnet because I didn't know what else to do with power, about a foam finger hiding copies because sometimes salvation looks like something you buy at a ballpark. "I'm not a prize for good behavior," I said. "Not mean, just true." He nodded like he'd rehearsed the part where I said exactly that and then reached for my hands without trapping them. "I know," he said. "You're a person. I want to be the person who gets to make room for you. If you say no now, it isn't a door closing. It's a calendar moving." I wanted to make a joke about how romance sounds like a spreadsheet when he talks, but the truth landed cleaner than humor. "I don't want spectacle," I said. "I want boring and stubborn. I want you to call Tara before you call me if you feel a bad habit breathe. I want the clinic funded whether we're fighting or not. I want Lena never wondering which version of you is coming home." He swallowed like the ring was a pill and said, "Yes, to all of that." And then he did something I'd never seen him do in a year of learning each other. He put his head on the table and laughed. Not the tight kind, the relieved kind, the kind that makes you look around to see who you get to share it with. We didn't decide a date. We decided that deciding together counts. Sometimes strangers still recognize me. The internet gave me a season I didn't ask for. And they say, "You're the medic," and want a picture, like bravery is catching. I always feel awkward, and then I give them what I have. I'm the person who was there. A lot of people were there. And if they stay a second, I tell them what I tell the rookies. Hero is a job we pass around. Then I ask how they're sleeping. And sometimes that's the piece that matters. The city hasn't turned into a postcard. Hurricanes still flirt with the Gulf, and politics still smells like old gravy, and somebody is still building a fence where a door would have cost less. But the mill's window's open now. The clinic's schedule stays full. And when a motor backfires out on St. Claude, you can watch a dozen hands go up without thinking. "You okay? You okay? You okay?" It makes a kind of music. I used to think I crossed a street for a kid and ended up in a story about men with guns. Maybe. But when I look at the year we just lived, it feels like I crossed a street into a neighborhood that decided to be responsible for itself. That feels like the point. The ring sits in a small dish by the sink next to a Saint's bottle opener and a half-dead plant Lena insists is resting. I told Dorian I'll wear it when I want. Not because we need to prove a thing to anybody. He kissed my temple, like that answer was the one he was hoping for. And then he signed home with both hands, like a prayer. We eat at the table. We argue about groceries. We do the calendar. Tomorrow's clinic is full. I'm not cured of fear. I'm trained in staying. That's enough for a good life.